how different is the experience of digital SAT compared to the paper SAT?
One thing that I think I definitely found was the biggest difference, especially in the reading, was the passage length, where
How do you learn Desmos the best? What has helped you learn Desmos?
I've heard a lot of people talk about how it's really strong pull, but it's, I think one of its strengths is that, yeah, I would say that strategies, I feel like the term strategies can be kind of deceptive. It's a lot of like what yeah, I would just say it's always important to remember that while the SAT and all the other college related stuff is important.
What they should worry about and what they should not worry about. That's it, like leaving
Yeah.
thoughts for that. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Great Podcast, episode one. We have Ethan Coleman with us. And of course, all of you are very unfamiliar with this podcast. And even I was about it like a month back. But yeah, here we are. So before we move on to Ethan, I just want to give a bit about what we are trying to do on Beyond the Great. It's all about the high school stories that come in from different individuals across the globe who are trying to crack it in the academics world and beyond the great, right, as it comes. So today we have Ethan, who is in his senior year. He is college bound and is taking his SATs and a bunch of things going on in his college application route. Instead of just asking him the only things about, let's say, how did your exam go, or like, what did you prepare? We want to go back to Ethan's schooling, where does he come from, and his role uh, to this part and beyond, right? What are his goals? So that we can understand a bit more about um, this story, because the test might be standardized in nature, but every story is very different. So that was the idea about picking the stories up. And I'm really appreciative of Ethan because, like, we connected very randomly on the SAT subreddit. And here he has accepted this invitation to be there on the first episode. I believe, like, we can have him down the line as well. So yeah, moving on, Ethan, if you can give us a bit of an intro about yourself, that would be good to go, and then we can have a couple of questions about where you come from and your schooling. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, my name's Ethan Coleman. I'm a current junior in high school in Pennsylvania, and just working through getting all that ready for the college application process. Just took second SAT a few weeks ago. Should be getting scores for that today, and yeah, working through that.
Yep. So as it looks like, you mentioned it that you are college bound, you just took a couple of ACTs, but take us a bit backwards, right? Like in the Penn State, you have like, have you been always in the Penn State? Like, how has been your schooling like, right? Did it help you in your academics till this point?
Yeah, so I've been in the same school district since kindergarten, so haven't moved around too much. It's I do go to public school, not private or anything like that. It's a fair I'd say it's a fairly small town, not super big city or anything, but it's a nice school. I definitely enjoy it. Glad for the opportunities I have there. I would say
Yep.
that they definitely do have some opportunities that have helped me. Um, I was just different enrichment things that I was able to do in elementary school that kind of drove me to enjoy learning more and just to really go deeper into stuff.
Yep. And just a bit about yourself, right? Like, have you been that sort of a person who has been always academic in nature, or do you have a bunch of extracurriculars up your sleeves? What's happening with you at this point?
Yeah, so I've always enjoyed academics. I'm like a member of the school quiz bowl team. Math team got second in the math competition. It's over like 250 people or so. I am on the school rifle team for athletically, which been on for 2 years. Best sophomore last year, best junior this year so far. I member of FBLA where I did financial math and scored for states. I'm a member of Science Club where I do research programs, research projects, and I qualified for states to for a competition with that. And my project for that was about predicting population growth of a species in an ecosystem.
Mhm.
I also tutored students for the reading and writing section of SATs on Schoolhouse, which is a peer tutoring website. So
Yep. That's an impressive all-round portfolio, Ethan. Definitely like starting from academics, being in quiz club, math club, to shooting rifles, being the best there, coming back teaching, giving, paying it forward to the other students. Because I believe Schoolhouse doesn't take any, like it's free, and yeah, it's helping a bunch of students out there. So like you have done it all. So like yeah, as we have just mentioned, talked about SATs, right? And you have taken it twice. So presumably that would be one last year, the paper SAT, and this year you had taken the March digital SAT. So it's one of the most popular questions these days is how different is it? How different is the experience of digital SAT compared to the paper SAT?
yeah, I definitely say it's quite different. I took my first SAT this last fall in October, which I think was the last offering of the physical. One thing that I think I definitely found was the biggest difference, especially in the reading, was the passage length. Where, I mean, it's known, but it definitely affects how you're taking it. With the physical, it's just a few longer passages, and now it's just a bunch of shorter passages, so it definitely affects it. I'm not sure if I'd say it's more or less reading overall. I'd probably say it's a bit more, but there's also different types of questions. So, and then for the math, the addition of Desmos definitely makes things interesting because it's a very powerful calculating tool for calculations. Whereas before there was a no calculator and a calculator section, but even in the calculator section, the physical calculators weren't quite as easy to use as Desmos is.
Yes, I believe that has changed the game a lot. And you have seen your friends, you yourself. Okay, just give us a bit of a work through around like how did you score for your last paper SAT? Because I believe you had a pretty high score for that.
Yeah, so for my first taking, I took it in October, which was a physical, and I got a 1540, which was an 800 on the English and 740 on the math. And I want to go into like a computer science or math area, so I decided to take it again to try to get a bit of a higher math score. So that's why I took it again, just this most recent time, SAT school day in March. I'm actually supposed to be getting results for that today, so I'm assuming they'll be coming relatively soon, but not sure on that yet.
Yep. Wish you the best for the same. But like if we talk about like you so are you also considering the fact of super scoring? Like if your target colleges do have it, or is it like are you looking for like do you have a strategy of kind, or like you will just go with what the college picks for you?
Yeah, I mean, the 800 in the English is definitely very nice for super scoring purposes. I was pretty happy to see that. The only thing that I was a bit unfortunate is that a lot of colleges are not taking super scores between physical and digital just because of how different they are. And so that is definitely one thing that is unfortunate, but I definitely am considering trying to super score with that. And I mean, the ultimate goal for this taking was to have even I'd be fine with like a bit of a lower English score if I could get a higher math score because just a lot of the things I want to do are more focused on math, so the programs that I want to get into are just require a higher math score.
Yep. Understood, understood. And if you would have to give an advice to someone who has a very high PSAT score, or maybe haven't even, is not from the US as well, right? Like from anywhere globally, they're trying something in the Ivy League. They're looking for somewhere in like doing good in the math section, for that instance, like 740, I believe, of course, like you can always, like, you have your own standards for that. But somebody who is, let's say, just starting out, getting a 1100, 1200 on the practice tests, how would you say that person should go forward in their preparation?
I would say that the practice tests are definitely one of the resources I utilize the most. Both the partial ones that you can find online and the official ones on Blue Book. Those were some of the biggest help to me because if, well, first, if you don't feel confident with all those material on there, then I'd recommend probably studying at first. I know there are a few topics that I definitely felt I had to brush up on, and so I'd recommend getting that first. But then after that, I think just getting exposure to the different types of questions is probably the best bet. And especially because I know that in some of the first couple of practice tests I took, I noticed that I made a lot of really stupid mistakes. Like it would ask for 2x and I gave it x and that type of thing. So
Mm.
just learning how to read the different types of questions. Effect.
Or right, and how underrated or overrated Desmos is? Like, of course, it's very underrated still, but I would love to know your point of view. And how do you learn Desmos the best? What has helped you learn Desmos?
I would say that Desmos is probably a bit underrated. I've heard a lot of people talk about how it's a really strong tool, but it's I think one of its strengths is that traditionally, whenever on the calculator section on the physical test, you could do a lot of the similar things that you can do with Desmos, but with it's a bit more challenging. It takes a bit more work, and so um, like you would have to format it at least so it's a y equals to put in the text most of the physical calculators. Whereas with Desmos, you can just kind of put it in there with whatever format you want, which makes solving systems of equations and things like that way easier because you can just put it in the calculator and it will output a point immediately.
Yep.
So I
And like,
think
how did you
for
learn about
learning
it?
how to
Is it
use it, just yeah. So for learning how to use it, I would say that while you're, like I said, with taking practice tests and doing practice problems, just getting used to using it there can be helpful, and then also just because you can just go to the website Desmos and their graphing calculator. You can kind of get familiar with what all it can do, and I know I was fortunate in that aspect to some extent because in some math classes we've used Desmos a little bit, so I kind of knew a little bit of how to work with it. So that definitely I think helped.
all right? So math classes help, but spend a lot of your time on the Desmos.com graphing calculator, play with the slider, look at the points, how it changes, right? Like it's I think like uh, yeah, like if you practice it, especially with some practice questions, I believe like you just get accustomed with it more and more. There is this like college boards question bank called the SAT Suite Question Bank, and it has a bunch of these questions, right? Like which makes you familiar, gets you familiar with like the new reading and writing questions. So do you have a say on that? Like because in practice tests you have five, like six practice tests now. So how do you get more questions to practice?
Yeah, so what I would recommend for that is the one downside of the SAT Suite question bank is that a lot of the questions in that are also on the practice test on Blue Books. I've noticed that some of them seem familiar at times. And so I think it's definitely important if you're going to take the practice test to try to take one or a couple of them before you really delve into the SAT Suite question bank. And then once you do that and you are ready to use this, if you're looking that because those practice tests can tell you kind of which types of questions you really need more work on also. And then one thing about that's nice about the question bank is you can actually sort by the different skills and sub skills to really focus on what you want to work on.
Yeah, like, and I think that gives us a very good segue, right, to analyze your performance. How are you doing in these different domains and skills? Um, right, like a lot of students, they're not familiar with these different domains. Like English has four domains, math has four domains, like, and they have like math has, I believe, 19 skills, English has 10 skills, right? So, do you analyze your performance domain or skill wise after you take a test? Or, yeah, how do you go about that?
Yeah, I think that by if you look a little bit at the different domains, you can kind of see which types of questions like they usually are. Like, um, like conventions of standard English is more of the grammar and that type of thing. And so you can, if you take a practice test and you see like I got a lot of grammar questions wrong, or I got a lot of using these tables and charts as evidence wrong, then yeah, I'd say it's definitely beneficial to just do a few more of those and work out or look up strategies if you don't have any.
Yeah. You mentioned strategies. You have received a 1540 before. How important are they? What are some, like, if you're not spilling secrets, but what are some good strategies where somebody is already good with concepts can they can utilize and yeah, maybe score a bit more.
Yeah, I would say that strategies, I feel like the term strategies can be kind of deceptive. It's a lot of like what I call strategies aren't necessarily test taking strategies so much as just ways to approach different problems. Like just in general, it's I think it's always important to ask yourself and make sure you know exactly what the question is asking you or what it wants you to find. Because for math, it might be a variable you don't expect, or for reading, it might be that they want you to prove the opposite of something instead of proving it. That type of thing. Whereas I think that certain types of problems you can definitely do certain types. I know with like I mentioned, like those tables and graph ones, I found that I kind of tend to look at the go through the answers and look at okay, which of these are true from the graph, and then that'll help me to eliminate some, and then after that, look at which of them are actually answering the question. So just kind of narrowing down in a systematic way is always really helpful to me in just process of elimination.
So for reading and writing command of evidence questions, if you face a graph, you first look at the graph, you try to figure out which options are relatable, and then you go for the passage. Like if I really got you correct there.
Yeah, so to some extent that, and the especially what I do is I just look at the answers, and a lot of the times they'll have one or even two answers that just is contrary to the evidence in the graph or table. If the graphs is like 30% of these people do it, it might say, and 40% do this, it might say the answer might get something wrong about that and not be true. And I know that it can definitely be tempting if you just see an answer that is true to pick that answer. So I like to eliminate the answers that aren't true and then look at the answers that are left that are true and just see which of them directly answers the question at the end of the passage. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of folks get it wrong there. Like, they just go ahead with what looks right and then they miss the one that's the correct answer. It's like, it answers better. So yeah, there is something that's right and then there's something that's correct. So can be deceptive at times. Now moving back, right, like we have done a lot of like SAT related questions, but Ethan, you like you did you like you are right now in the college admission process, right? And how much time do you think someone should spend on the SAT itself, and like what other areas are there, like AP exams, extracurriculars, right? Like how do you balance everything, and like what is working what is working out for you?
Yeah, it definitely there are a lot of parts involved. I know that from what I've seen, colleges these days are definitely looking a lot more at extracurriculars and that. So I think that the SATs are definitely important, and but I would say the way my goal is to just get in the range for the colleges that I would like to go to for the SAT scores, if possible, or at least close to that. And then just focus on any extracurriculars that could help. And then AP exams just are always nice because if you score well on them, then that can save you money later on, which is always super helpful.
Yep. Understood. So it's more about like keep your focus on the STs. It's really important now. Again, like a lot of colleges getting it back. You talked about some of your target colleges, right? And a lot of students have these generic questions if they Google, right? Like what's a good score for XYZ college, right? How have you gone about targeting your colleges? Have you figured out a way like looking at some 50th percentile, 75th percentile? How did you work out this?
Yeah, for the most part, I've just been using college search sites and stuff like that that will a lot of the time just comparing rankings between them and just looking at like the top, like not even like just the top 10 or so, just those that have a decent program in the area I want to go to, and then just thinking about the cost because that is often listed there, and then for actually admission itself, I look usually 25th to 70th percentile for scores and that type of things, and the usual GPA, all the different stuff that because usually they colleges release a report on most of that stuff. So
Right. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward research in that manner. Um, yeah, so let's say somebody who, yeah, like who figured out how to take the SAT, like from working online, practiced really well, got the scores, right? Like, is like what's the journey forward, like what is it being like what is it being for you if you can speak about your days now, right? You have taken your SATs, you're college bound. What's going on in your head at the moment?
I think just kind of trying to look at all the things, compare the different colleges, all their different aspects is just definitely an ongoing process and trying to get ready for sending in applications.
All right, all right. And like, is there any sort of a pressure that work like on a student during the test, right? Like, do you have any pre-test sort of I don't know, a lot of habits? Some people eat a lot of food, some people don't sleep, some people have different habits pre-test. So, like, yeah, did you have any nerves before the test, and do you have any habits as such?
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely nerves that whenever you're taking really anything, taking something of importance like that. I would say that I just try to, calm myself down, however that may be, whether just be breathing deeply. And then just prior to test day, I just try to make sure that my body is well rested, has what it needs, so that I'm thinking clearly. So I just try to get more sleep than usual, just so that I'm well rested and eat a good breakfast. So yeah, I'd say that's I just computer restarted.
Yeah, yeah. All good. We just have a bad day with internet. All right. Yeah, I think we were in the calming nerves answer. So yeah, yeah, you just got it a bit midway. So if you can just go a bit again about you feel nerves during the test. How do you cope up with that?
Yeah, right. So for nerves, I think it's definitely natural just to have them because it's a test and it's a fairly important test. I think it's important to remember though, you can always take it again. That's one thing that helped me. Like if I'm not happy with my score, I can practice more and retake it. And then just trying to just, if you need to, just take deep breaths or just practicing, just how to calm yourself is always helpful. And then I just prior to the test, I just like to make sure that I eat prior to it, so I'm not distracted, not overeat, so that my stomach's not messed up, but just a full breakfast, and then yeah,
Yep. So you have plenty of sleep. You eat right. Um, Keep it healthy. Like a lot of people. try to, get at the exam at the end. They, like most of them actually. So, and like, they mess it up in terms of their health and everything, right? And some people actually score fairly well as well. Um, Reading at the last moment. Like my question to you is like, what is the optimum time that somebody, and I know it's like your answer might be it depends, but if somebody is just starting out, right? How much time should they take, like keep for their city? Like how many times should they study? How many months should they study for? How many hours during their school? Like how do they balance it and manage it?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, a lot of the answers it depends. I think the first thing is, do you know a lot of the concepts, like at least in general? Because if not, just spend as much time as you feel like you need to really get a solid grasp of concepts. And then once you do that, I would say, because that can just depend on each person, how long that takes. But after that, I would say it's good to set up a habitual period of study so that you're doing it at a similar time or for a similar length of time every week. So even if it's not much, like an hour or so a week, or an hour twice a week, that can really add up. And if you do it over a longer period of time, you can probably retain it better. For me personally, I did not study super months and months in advance, which I definitely wish I had the first time around taking it. Because I feel like it would have been better retained rather than just in the couple weeks before, just trying to get as much as I could. So I think it's probably better to space it out if you can and just get consistent studying.
So how long did you study? Was it a month or two? That's it.
For the first time taking it, I probably started studying. I kind of got sidetracked, forgot about it, so I kind of only started studying about 2 weeks before. So I just most of what I did, because there wasn't really a blue book with a practice test for the physical SAT or anything. I just did. I My math teacher the previous year had extra SAT prep books from previous thing that he had run. So he gave those out to us. So I worked with those a little bit and then just did some practice on Khan Academy and stuff, and that was mainly how I prepared.
Right? Like it's practice, and yeah, that would get you something close to 15, like like a complete full score on your reading and writing. Like that's something like a lot of people really, um, yeah, they dream about that. It's one of the dream scores to get a full score. Of course, like even for math, but that's a big one. I believe like we have like pretty much come to the close of it in terms of the SCT part and like how you're doing. If you can like leave with some thoughts around, so there will be a couple of questions, right? One is like and this is where I was coming at that yeah, like so somebody who needs that math preparation, right? Like right after, let's say, who has not sort of gotten the full score, right? Um, first question is, of course, like, how have you sort of improvised your study, right, in math that that may or may not, like like we don't know anything about the results, but how did you try to tackle that? Second is like, like what is your dream outcome, right? Like what are you looking for? Is it the college, or like are you thinking more than that? Like, like what do you want to become?
Yeah, so for the first question, improving the math, a lot of what I did for that is I realized because, like I said, I realized that I made stupid mistakes after taking practice tests, and because like I said, there wasn't a ton of physical practice tests. I kind of knew that I did it to some extent, but I didn't realize quite how much until after the first taking. And so one thing I did was definitely really making sure to train myself to read the question, find out exactly what it was asking. And then I also know that one of the weaker points for me on the first time was geometry. Whenever I got actually, I think it was the PSAT score that came back, and that was the one I think that I missed a question or two in, or more question than that than others. And so I just looked a little bit more in that, reviewed the concepts that I couldn't remember, and once I had a good understanding, I just, like I said, I did practice tests because at some point, once you know most of the concepts and you feel like you have a decent grasp of that, and it's a lot of it is just about practicing questions because you'll run into a question that you might not be quite sure how to do, even though you might know the concepts attached to it. And so at that point, think it's just important to practice so you are exposed to different types of questions and get experience solving different things.
Don't make silly mistakes, number one, and number two, practice for concepts. To show that up. But to the main question, right? And yeah, this is pretty much the final one. That is, yeah, like what you're looking forward to at the moment. What's your dream goal?
Yeah, so like I said, for the second taking, I really wanted to get a better math score because I feel like I definitely could because I know that on the physical I did kind of bad with time management, which was I didn't have a ton of experience with at that point, and just a couple things. So I knew walking out that I had gotten the last couple wrong on it because I just didn't have time to really do it, and I didn't wasn't quite sure on how to do it. So I wanted to improve that just both for myself so I could feel a bit more because like I know it's a good score, but I like feeling that I really did my best. And then just the other reason for wanting to get a higher math score is, like I said, I want to go into math field. So some of the colleges I want to get into, there's not really a specific college at this point, just looking at a few different ones, but a lot of them have an average of like 770, 780 plus for the math because for the math related majors and that type of thing. And so just getting up in that score range just to better
Hmm.
applied in that. And because if you get a
Yep.
better program, it's not game changing, but it can be helpful to get connections into careers later. So
Yeah, I mean, math is super important. Like, if you go, like, even in mathematics, like, deeper, or even, yeah, like in artificial intelligence, building those neural networks, everything is mathematics. And, yeah, pretty lovely as a field. And, really happy to know, right, like, that, you are interested because I believe, like, people are these days are very away from it, right? They are all chasing the shiny object syndrome. They all have it, but you have fixated yourself on what matters, and it's the base. People can write that function on the program, right? Like maybe some neural network function, something, but they can't define the mathematics like behind it, right? So I think. Really, like, it's something like, I believe like you're detail oriented in some nature, and that really helped a lot with regards to how you sort of tackled all the questions, all the problems, and even how you look at things. Um, yeah, any last, like, open perspective about the city or overall, right? Like a student, right? What they should worry about and what they should not worry about. That's it. Like leaving
yeah,
thoughts for that.
yeah, I would just say it's always important to remember that while the SAT and all the other college related stuff is important, it's not the end of the world. Like if you don't get a great score, and even if you don't aren't able to go to the college of your choice, it's not the difference between a super successful life and a terrible life. It's the difference between one of the top colleges and one that's somewhere in the middle is not as substantial as a lot of places will have it seem. And like sure, more colleges with a bigger name might be helpful, but really their main help is you might learn a little bit more, but the main thing is just that people know to look at those colleges. If they know that they have problems, you might just get early career connections, but if you advocate yourself and go out there with one that is still a good school for sure, but not one of those top 10 or top 20 or anything, you can still, it's not necessary to stress over getting into super high school because it's not as big of a difference as people often say it is.
Indeed. I think that's a pretty unpopular opinion and maybe the highlight of this show. because like people are very status driven, brand driven, and I think it helps to a certain extent. If you get a good college, you get very good network as of that. But if you really like want to study, yeah, I believe like you have the world at your play like feet, right? Like you can even connect with any professor of any college if you have something interesting to talk about, right? The world is pretty well connected. So yeah, like we'll leave you with that thought. And Ethan, if somebody wants to be valuable to you or wants to connect with you, where do they find you?
So if you are interested in just asking, do have a I am planning on doing more tutoring on reading and writing for that schoolhouse program. So, and if general it's a good program, I'm also to some extent active on Reddit, so I can probably do some of that. Yeah.
I'll Yeah, I'll tag you Reddit for sure. Jack Laser, right? Yeah, a different episode on what's behind that name. But I think it was lovely talking to you, and yeah, like you can find him on Schoolhouse, or you can even just reach out to him directly. Really appreciate it. It's our episode one, so even a lot from my side to improve on the questions. But yeah, I think this will be really valuable to everyone who is starting out, or even maybe somebody mid journey. So thank you so much, Ethan. I hope you love the same as well, and stay tuned for the episode 2. Thank you so much.